Yeah, that was a super compelling piece of your book when you talk about interstellar travel. So like the time dilation that occurs when you travel at the speed of light. So like if we eventually figure out light speed travel, and I think you made the case in your book that it takes like 22 years to travel from like the edge of the universe to the center of the universe or something like that in rocket time.
Rocket time, 11 years to the center from the edge, 22.
22 from edge to edge of the universe.
Yeah, or to the center and back from the edge.
Is that traveling at like light speed or what speed is that?
Yeah, like 99.99999%.
Okay.
But yeah, so that would
that's
be
100,000 years on Earth time.
Right.
Or something like that. Or no, from like edge to edge, it was like 2 million years, right?
No, it was 100,000. Yeah, so
100,000.
a 22-year round trip. And this is based on, God, I'm spacing his name. But yeah, a well-known physicist did these calculations. I don't have the capacity to do that math, but yeah, he said that 22-year round trip in your ship, very doable. You could survive that. Would be 100,000 years on Earth, based on the basic time dilation, Einstein's 1905 paper.
Right.
I think it was called The Electrodynamics of Moving Bodies or something like that.
Yeah, which is it's displayed nicely in Interstellar how he goes off and he comes back and his daughter is like 90 years old.
Exactly. Yeah,
but,
and the argument I made is that if we're going to do interstellar travel,
we're say goodbye to everybody.
Yeah, we're going to need to also conquer backward time travel.
Right.
Because you don't want to just get back to your planet and have everybody be dead. You want to get back to your time too.
It's hilarious how you explained that if we sent a crew of astronauts out to explore the edge of the galaxy and they were 25 years into their trip, and then all of a sudden like a set of astronauts pulled up next to them in like 10 minutes with their belly full of breakfast
from Earth breakfast. That wasn't mine. I pulled that. A guy was writing about my book on Medium. And those were his words. Yeah, I was quoting him in there. I can't remember his name, Trevor something.
That's hilarious.
Yeah,
because
he put that so well. I loved that.
They're in a 25-year trip to the edge of the galaxy, but that's really like 100,000 years on Earth, which we could easily develop technology that's so much more advanced by then, and they could travel probably 10 times the speed.
And it was a great point, one that I hadn't even thought of.
Yeah.
As soon as I read that, I was like, damn, that's a really good point, because, if things are speeding up on Earth, what's the point of even trying to send somebody out? Because they're going to get all this way and this very fancy technology, and then you just catch right up to them. Right. Because everything's going so fast back on Earth. And I'd never even thought about that, but Trevor Mahoney, I think was his name. But he phrases it really well, too, and the implications of that.
It would be pointless.
People catch up like, shit, seriously? Like, I've been doing this this is my life's work, and they're just whizzing by me.
Yeah, that's such a paradox because it would render it pointless.
Yeah.
Right? Because you spend your whole life traveling and then Earth just catches up and you're here like in this primitive spaceship. What's the point?
Yeah. But at what point do you do it with that in mind? Like where do you draw the line? Because at some point you're going to want to do it.
Right. Right. Well, it would make sense that we would want to figure out time travel first so we could go back and get back
True. Yeah.
Get back to that time in our life.
Yeah, because then you already know. You can go forward.
Yeah.
And actually a friend of mine, Hussein Ali Agrama, he's a professor of anthropology as well at the University of Chicago, but he made a little cameo in that book. He's the guy that I had in there proposing the super technological singularity. Like people talk about a singularity in AI.
Yeah.
But he's saying like if these are future humans, at some point, if we know who they are and we have access to all of the knowledge of the future, we instantly become part of that. Like it's the singularity where all of the information, all of the technology is available to us. And we could solve so many problems. We could cure all of these diseases. We would be them instantly. It's pretty wild to think about, but I think he makes a solid point.
That is pretty wild to think about. Are there people that think that I think a lot of people speculate that the singularity is going to happen in like the 2030s, 2040s. Do people ever talk about when we might be able to figure out time travel or actually experiment with time travel?
Well, what's interesting is that if time travel exists, we have time travel at all points in the past that can reach. So there really is no point where time travel becomes new, essentially. Because think about it. Like we say we don't have time travel yet, but it exists 100 years in our future.
Yeah.
Someone from 100 years in our future can come back and pick us up now and take us to whatever point in the past they want to. We didn't have it now, But because it's accessible to the people in the future that do, it's also accessible to us. It's kind of the same thing as that super technological singularity, where all of these things and these capabilities become available to us at whatever point they decide to let us know. And that may be a part of what this disclosure movement is too, is shifting us toward that, because finally we're not the humans trying to have a conversation with ants. We're the humans trying to have a conversation with more advanced humans.
So do you think these government programs where they have these crashed vehicles or these reverse engineering programs, these are time machines that they have? And
yeah. And I've think about it too, like if they are, say this time machine crashed in Roswell. Let's just use the Roswell example.
Okay.
People see this as a paradox too, even though it's also not paradoxical in a block universe. But if you go back in time and crash this thing outside the desert of Roswell in 1947, those people didn't create that thing. It crashed into there. But they're reverse engineering it. They're figuring out how to use it and how to make it and how to fly it and how it manipulates space-time. And eventually, you develop that same machine that goes back and crashes in 1947, starts it over, goes back. It's this infinite time loop of self-consistent events that are connected across two different points in the block universe. But where the paradox comes from, it's called the bootstrap paradox, is because people think there has to be an origin point. There has to be a creator. They say, who created it? It must be a paradox. Doesn't matter. That thing's always existed in those bookended connected points in space-time. The people in the past didn't create it because it crashed into their time. People in the future didn't create it because it took the reverse engineering of the people who had it initially to create that thing. So it's like, I always say it's like looking for a corner on a rounded ball. There is no corner because it's not a block, it's a ball. It doesn't matter. It's just always existed. But it violates our fragile sensibilities about linear time and cause and effect. One of the first things we do in kindergarten is we're given these little things, we got to cut out the paper and then put them in order. We're taught from a very young age, brainwashed almost, that linear time is all there is. Mm-hmm. Not the case when you have backward time travel capabilities.
And why do you think these things technically and physically can work as time machines? Because there's been the cases made in the book from the guys who were given. There was one guy who saw the thing hovering above a lake or a river or something like that, and he basically showed him the schematics and how the thing operated. And you claim that that's how a time machine would work.
Udo Artena. Yeah. Well, what they told him is that they were extracting hydrogen from the water in order to power it, I guess. I don't know. Or it had something to do with their power system, which
again,
makes
these
sense.
Were human-looking things.
Entirely human.
Entirely humans.
They spoke to him verbally. They said they spoke 500 languages. I make an interesting correlation in that book because the case study right before it was Mike and Leo Dworshak in South Dakota. The one with Udo Wartena was in outside of Helena, Montana, not far from where I live. And they both claimed to have spoken 500 languages, came out of ships that looked very similar, had very similar appearances and clothing. I wonder if maybe they were the same, if there was the same group that just happened to come across these two different groups of individuals. But that makes sense. You could use the oxygen to breathe, and you could use the hydrogen for power. I kind of feel that maybe they're using something more, like they've cracked the case on zero-point energy, cold fusion, perhaps, because they're going to need a lot of energy to do this. In any case, so it seems that the craft themselves, as I mentioned earlier, we have this expression in biology that form follows function. And you can use this with anything. You can look at the form of a fork and think, well, that probably stabs something to eat. You can watch people use it, obviously, and get more information. But the form of these crafts seemed to indicate the function of backward time travel. So what I did, because I don't understand how to backward time travel, I'm an anthropologist, nobody understands how to do that. What I did is I started with Einstein's 1915 paper on general relativity. His first one in 1905 was on special relativity. We just talked about the twin paradox, also not a fucking paradox. But how time and space are relative. That was the point of the electrodynamics of moving bodies paper. In 1915, he talked about how there's a curvature of space-time, which was largely developed in association with his mentor, Minkowski space-time. It's our four-dimensional, the same understanding that we have today. So It's relative. When you travel at a high rate of speed, like we were talking about right before we started back up, everything's compressed. You're going away from the Earth, and it looks like everything stops. You look back, and everything's just frozen because you're moving at the same speed as the light that left Earth at that same time. As you turn around and come back, you're now blasting through all of those moments that you had missed as you were traveling, and then a whole bunch more because you compress space and time. So by the time you get back, everybody's much older, as we had just talked about. So with the curvature of space-time, his 1915 paper, very soon after he published that, there were solutions to the field equations he published that showed with the rotation of a highly massive and or energetic, at first it was a universe, or the Earth initially, just any sort of massive spinning body. Lenz and Therian, I think in 1918, demonstrated, and it's pretty common if you put like a bowling ball in oil or molasses and spin it, the oil and molasses start spinning with it. So it's that rotational energy that can create what's called closed time-like curves. It can bend over light cones. And a good way of thinking of light cones is if you turn on a flashlight, okay? You just flip it on real fast, turn it off. The light can only move out in this direction. Nothing can move faster than light, so anything within that light cone is moving with it. So it's always going from past to future. However, with this rotational energy, which Lenz and Therian showed in 1918, then Gödel showed with a rotating universe, essentially, that creates the same tipping over of light cones. So when you tip over the light cones and they go far enough, now the past is also at play. Like you're still moving forward, you're still obeying the laws of physics, but you're able to move into the past. Carry that forward, Van Stockham in the 1950s, I think, and then importantly, Frank Tipler in the 1970s showed that if you shrink down this galaxy of essentially, but an infinite galaxy is what Van Stockham and Gödel had argued, that you need this infinite mass. Tipler showed if you shrink that down to a ring, sphere, or importantly, a disk of finite size, you can create that same warpage of space-time and the same bending over of light cones in order to travel into the past. And this is why I say that form follows function, because that's essentially what a UFO looks like, the cylindrical, disc-shaped UFOs. It's this rapidly spinning disk that seemingly can manipulate space-time. So even beyond that, in my second book, I tie in a number of cases where space and time is manipulated. You have Corporal Armando Valdez in 1977. He walks in the proximity of this craft. He's gone for 15 minutes based on what his men see, so the different reference frames. When he emerges, he's weak, he's got a beard, and his watch reads 5 days in the future. So for him, he was gone 5 days. To his men, he was gone 15 minutes. And there's case after case like that. And I try to highlight a number of them in the extra tempestural model because it demonstrates that what is happening, these things might be time machines themselves, that they're able to manipulate space-time. If things like that are happening and they're in control of it, what's keeping them from going back into the past? And, you know, based on the Fermi paradox, he famously said, if there's all these aliens, where are they? This potentially helps explain it, that we are seeing future humans, that if they are going into the past, why don't we see them? I think we are, and I think they're inside the UFOs.
Whoa. So the people that go on board these crafts, they can somehow, who's ever manipulating them, they can somehow make time stand still, or they can somehow, or no, they don't make time stand still, but I don't understand why time would move faster. Like, where are they going?
I think what's happening is that inside the craft, everything is extremely normal. Everything feels normal.
Right.
Time moves as you would experience now at the speed of life, you could say. But there's this, what Jim Penniston called a sphere of influence around it. When he went and approached the craft in the Rendlesham Forest in 1980, all of a sudden he's described it as walking through water. Like everything was different. He felt like his movements were more labored and time was moving differently. It's seemingly what's happening is that there is this sphere of influence, and Corporal Armando Valdez crossed it. He walked into that sphere of influence. Time, he disappeared because if you, I think that was my first book, sorry. I think once he crossed that, you would expect them to disappear. In the same way that these UFOs pop in and out of existence, they appear and disappear. And to go back to something that I accidentally skipped over earlier, when we were talking about the superhighway, how NASA says it's incredibly quiet in space.
Yeah.
Steve Mera, a UFO researcher in the UK, pointed out, why is that? You know, what does that mean? We would expect to see the superhighway. They're constantly coming and going from outer space if they're from outer space. But what we actually see is them popping in and out of our four-dimensional frame of reference, which is exactly what we'd expect to see of a time machine. It would appear and disappear as it moves into the future or past. And that's the same thing that seems to be happening here. And as it was pointed out to me after I published my first book by someone who claimed to be an intelligence agent, who was really concerned that I understand what he was saying. He wrote me the first time. I was like, oh, that's cool. And he could tell I didn't understand what the hell he was talking about. Wrote me again like, no, I really think you need to hear what I'm saying. Well, what he pointed out, which seemed very obvious once he said it, is that when we see these craft doing these right angle turns at tens of thousands of miles an hour, the G-forces would be 5 to 10,000 Gs. Nothing could survive that.
Right.
But what he pointed out to me is that the way in which they're manipulating space-time just creates the illusion of them moving that fast, and that they use this speed to mask themselves. They slow everything down, speed up their frame of reference as we perceive it in order to do these things. So that 90-degree turn may be 1 G to them, but because of the manipulation of space-time and these different reference frames inside that sphere of influence for them versus outside of it for us, we see this as some incredible maneuver that would squash anything inside, when in fact that's just a perception differential. It's a difference in the way we perceive what's happening versus how they perceive it because they manipulate space-time in and around these craft.
Okay.
That's not my information. That was given to me by someone who claims to be an ex-intelligence officer.
Somebody that just emailed you out of the blue?
Yeah, but it makes a lot of damn sense. It makes perfect sense. And if we slow, there's so many cases where something will zip across the sky. You slow it down and you can see the craft doing this. And they might use it to protect themselves too. If we start shooting at them, these bullets, which seemingly are going 700 miles an hour, 1,000 miles an hour to us, they're like, oh, we should probably move over here because they're shooting at us again. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's also, it was described, I think, with Fravor, right? He said that like the thing showed up at his cat point, or whatever.
They knew the future. Yeah, that's an interesting one too.
Is it kind of like that one Quicksilver scene in X-Men? The
I've
kitchen
never seen
scene?
that.
I haven't seen that either. I'm more of
You
a,
want to
I'm a Marvel
let's
guy.
watch it and get this episode copywritten. Just don't show it on the screen.
Yeah.
Is it the same with video? If you show less than 15 seconds and you don't have to get the rights? Or?
I don't know. Usually if you show anything.
Yeah, exactly. Or like the Matrix too, when he's dodging the bullets, he just slows time down. And
This
that's a perfect metaphor, Steve. Exactly.
That's why.
Okay.
So that's what he's claiming. And as soon as he said that, I was like, Jesus, yeah, that makes so much sense. And I included that in my second book because I thought it was highly relevant to this conversation.
Huh.
And if they're time travelers, they absolutely have the ability to do this, in whatever capacity they want.